The tires of my SUV growled, crushing the loose gravel on the familiar driveway. I killed the engine, rubbing my dry eye sockets after a long flight home. Sitting on the passenger seat inside my canvas duffel bag was a sealed envelope from a lawyer. This morning, I found out my grandmother left me $7 million. I already had a plan mapped out in my head: use the cash to pay off the mortgage entirely, maybe salvage this rotting marriage. But when I stepped out of the truck, my smile died. My husband Logan didn't step forward to hug me. He stood rigid on the porch, arms crossed, his left hand gripping a manila envelope. Next to him, my mother-in-law Maria wore a half smirk. That familiar grin of someone who just secretly pulled the plug on a life support machine. The Colorado wind bit into my cheeks, raw and unforgiving. It carried the suffocating stench of Maria's cheap drugstore perfume, a heavy floral odor that completely smothered the crisp scent of pine. I kept my hand shoved deep inside my jacket pocket. My fingers wrapped tight around my car keys. The jagged brass edges dug deep into my knuckles. Hard. I welcomed the sharp, stinging pain. It kept my feet planted on the concrete. Logan shifted his weight on the porch, blocking the front door. He planted his legs wide apart. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt at asserting dominance. He wore a stiff, off-the-rack suit that screamed of maxed-out credit cards and desperate ambition. A terrible fit for a guy who spent more time at the local betting parlor than actually showing real estate. "House is sold, Amara," Logan said. His voice came out flat, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted left, then right, refusing to hold my gaze. "The new owners want it completely empty by Monday morning. You need to pack your crap and figure out somewhere else to crash. We're done here." My chest tightened. A heavy, suffocating block of ice dropped straight into my stomach. My pulse hammered against my eardrums in a frantic, deafening rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. But my body knew exactly what to do. My spine snapped straight, rigidly aligning itself. A pure survival reflex. My eyes automatically scanned the physical space of the porch, the faded brass house numbers I'd screwed into the siding last spring, the chipped blue ceramic pot I painted by hand, the porch light with the dead bulb he never bothered to change. Everything was exactly where I left it. Everything except my life. Maria chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sugary pity. She crossed her arms, her cheap acrylic nails tapping against her sleeves. "Don't look so shocked, sweetheart. You're never around anyway. A man has needs. He needs a real home. Not a wife who treats this place like a cheap motel whenever she feels like showing up. Logan deserves a fresh start." "We all do. You dragged him down long enough." I didn't scream. I didn't throw my bag. I didn't shed a single tear. Tears were useless currency with people like them. I just stared. My silence stretched out. Thick, heavy, poisonous. Logan hated silence. He always had to fill the quiet with his own voice. He cleared his throat loudly, shifting his weight again. The manila envelope crinkled violently in his fist. He was getting twitchy. "Don't try to fight this, Amara." Logan snapped his tone, raising a notch defensively. My lawyer handled all the paperwork. Both our names were on the deed. I had every legal right to list it and sell it. It's a done deal. You have zero leverage here, so don't make a scene in front of the neighbors. Slowly, deliberately, I unzipped the top of my canvas bag sitting on my shoulder. I slid my hand inside the dark compartment. My fingertips brushed against the thick, crisp paper of the attorney's letter. $7 million. A massive lifeline I was ready to hand over to him on a silver platter just 10 minutes ago. I pushed the envelope deep down to the bottom of the bag. I buried it under my heavy work boots. I pulled the zipper shut. The metallic rasp sliced sharply through the freezing air. "So?" I finally spoke. My voice was completely hollow. No tremor, no rage. Just a flat, dead calm that made Maria stop tapping her nails. "The deal is finalized." Logan's chest puffed out immediately. He mistook my calm for absolute defeat. A smug, arrogant grin spread across his face, mirroring his mother's nasty smirk. "Signed, sealed, and funded. The cash is already sitting in my account." I looked him dead in the eye, stripping away any trace of emotion. "Did the transaction close today?" He scoffed, shaking his head slowly like I was a slow, pathetic child. "Yesterday morning. You're late to your own funeral, Amara. I didn't blink. I didn't say another word to him. I just turned my back on the porch and grabbed the heavy handle of my SUV door. The freezing metal felt incredible against my burning skin. Logan thought he had just won the lottery. He didn't know I transferred the property title into my name and my name only 6 months ago. He hadn't just sold a house. He had just committed real estate fraud. I slammed my boot on the gas pedal. The SUV jerked forward, leaving the gravel driveway and the sickening smell of Maria's perfume far behind. I drove blind. My hands choked the leather steering wheel until the joints in my fingers throbbed, glowing a sickly white. I blew past the old brick coffee shop where Logan first promised me we were building a forever home. A home I earned by sleeping on hard dirt cots thousands of miles away, wiring every single paycheck straight into our joint checking account. I pulled into an empty, cracked asphalt lot overlooking the Cherry Creek Reservoir. I threw the truck into park. The engine hummed a low, dull vibration through the floorboards. The windows were rolled up tight, trapping the stale heater air inside the cabin. I dropped my forehead heavily against the steering wheel. The cold plastic bit into my skin. For the first and last time today, I let the tears fall. They were silent, cold, bitter drops rolling down my cheeks. I was completely alone in the city I grew up in. I had people across the world who would take a bullet for me without a second thought, but the blood relatives I sacrificed everything for had just locked me out of my own front door. I gave myself exactly 15 minutes to be a victim. Then the hard plastic center console rattled violently. My phone buzzed against the cup holder, flashing a rapid series of text messages. I tilted my head, staring at the glaring white light. Logan, I need you to sign a quitclaim deed by tonight. Let's wrap this up clean. Another buzz. Maria. Maria. You're angry now, but you'll thank my son one day. He's doing what's best. I stared at those words. You'll thank my son one day. The toxic arrogance of that sentence hit my bloodstream like ice water. It was the perfect antidote. The tears drying on my face vanished, replaced by a deep, hollow calm. The suffocating weight in my chest evaporated. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me to bow my head and hand them the knife they used to stab me. I sat up straight. My spine locked into a rigid, perfect line. I wiped my damp cheeks with the rough sleeve of my jacket. No more crying. I reached over to the passenger seat and unzipped my heavy canvas duffel bag. I pulled out a thick, coarse cardboard folder, flipping it open on my lap. The cabin dome light cast a yellow glow over the stack of legal documents Andrew had handed me this morning. I ran my index finger down the crisp paper. There it was, bottom right corner. A bright, heavy red stamp from the county clerk's office. It was a recorded warranty deed. Dated 6 months ago. Grantee Amara Kinney, sole and separate property. I forced him to sign his rights away half a year ago to protect the house from his massive credit card debts. He signed it drunk on cheap beer, barely reading the fine print, thinking he was just dodging a lien. He didn't own a single brick of that house, and he just sold it to a complete stranger for cold, hard cash. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's private number. Andrew, I said. My voice was completely flat. The slight tremor was gone, replaced by the cold certainty of someone holding a lit match over a puddle of gasoline. Amara, you went to the house. I did. I replied, staring out at the freezing, dark water. He took the bait. He admitted he closed the deal yesterday morning. The money is sitting in his account. A heavy silence hung on the line. I heard the faint scratching of a pen. He actually took the cash. Andrew asked, his tone shifting into pure clinical precision. Every penny, I said. Lock the doors, Andrew. Initiate the freeze. I spent the night at Sky's cramped, messy apartment. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer fake sympathy or long hugs. She just opened the door, tossed a scratchy, heavy wool blanket at me, and pushed a mug of black, unsweetened coffee across her chipped Formica kitchen table. The coffee was scalding hot and tasted like battery acid. It was perfect. Whatever you need, Sky said, leaning against the doorframe in sweatpants. Just say the word. That was it. The only language I needed right now. I was born into a family that traded affection for control, but I found my real family in people like Sky. people who proved their loyalty by just showing up. The contrast was a bitter pill to swallow, but I washed it down with the bad coffee. By 9 the next morning, I was sitting inside Andrew Gordon's law office in Aspen. The room smelled like lemon pledge stale printer ink and expensive oak. It was painfully quiet. Andrew didn't waste time with small talk. He slid a thick, heavy stack of papers across the polished wood desk. It hit my hands with a dull thud. He didn't sell the house to get a fresh start. Andrew said, his voice stripped of any emotion. He adjusted his glasses. He sold it because he's drowning. I flipped the folder open. My eyes automatically fell into a cold, analytical rhythm. Scanning, processing, categorizing. It was a private investigator's report. Grandma Daisy had quietly hired someone 6 months ago, right before she passed. The numbers printed on the crisp white paper were sickening. Maxed out credit cards opened under his name. Massive personal loans carrying predatory interest rates. Thousands of dollars blown at mountain casinos. Receipts for expensive dinners and high-end car leases. I traced the dates with my index finger: July, August, October. Those were the exact months I was working overseas. The months I slept on hard dirt floors, choking on dust, working grueling 30-hour shifts, just to wire my hazard pay back to our joint account. I thought I was paying down our mortgage. I thought I was building a future. Instead, Logan treated my absence like a blank check. My sweat and blood paid for his pathetic illusion of a high-roller lifestyle. My stomach didn't churn. I didn't feel the urge to cry. The betrayal was so massive, so profoundly greedy, that it bypassed grief entirely. It solidified into a block of pure clinical disgust. I reached into the folder and pulled out a small handwritten letter tucked in the back. It was from Grandma Daisy. Her handwriting was shaky but deliberate. "Let the truth do the work, Amara." I folded the note, running my thumb over the crease until it was perfectly flat. I looked up at Andrew. He had his hands laced together, watching me carefully. "The real estate transaction yesterday," I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth. He signed the closing documents, claiming he had a clear title. Andrew nodded slowly. "He did. And since the title was legally transferred to you 6 months ago, he sold property he didn't own. And the buyer's money sitting in a holding account right now," Andrew replied, leaning forward slightly. "If Logan attempts to access those funds, or if he already has, it's wire fraud." I finished the sentence for him. Andrew didn't smile, but a cold glint flashed behind his lenses. "It's a felony." I closed the heavy folder. I aligned its edges perfectly with the edge of the oak desk. "Do nothing," I ordered, standing up. "Keep the freeze in place. Don't call him. Don't warn him. Let him step right on the landmine." I went back to work on Monday. I wore a standard issue faded gray cotton t-shirt. My hair was pulled back tight enough to give me a headache. I sat in the crowded break room under flickering yellow fluorescent lights, eating a dry turkey sandwich wrapped in cheap cellophane. The air smelled of burnt coffee and industrial floor cleaner. People at the tables next to me complained about the weather and their utility bills. No one knew I was currently living out of a canvas duffel bag in a motel off Interstate 70. I kept my spine completely straight. I chewed my food in silence, processed my paperwork with absolute precision, and waited for the sun to go down. By midnight, I was sitting in the dark. The motel room smelled like stale cigarette smoke and cheap bleach. The only light in the room came from the harsh blue glare of my laptop screen, painting my face in a cold, artificial wash. The ancient wall heater rattled aggressively in the corner. My fingers hovered over the plastic keyboard. Logan was busy spending money he didn't actually have. I pulled up his public social media feeds. The first post was a high-resolution photo of him leaning against the hood of a brand-new jet-black Tesla Model X. The caption read, "Fresh starts and big moves." His wrist was casually angled toward the camera to show off a chunky gold-plated Rolex. It was a classic real estate broker flex. Fake the lifestyle until someone buys the illusion. He was swiping his maxed-out credit cards, operating under the arrogant assumption that the hundreds of thousands of dollars from the house sale would drop into his checking account any second to clear his debts. Maria was right there with him, enabling the fantasy. Her page was an endless stream of check-ins at downtown Denver steakhouses. pictures of dry-aged ribbies, shrimp cocktails, and overpriced martinis. Then came the smear campaign. Maria couldn't just help her son steal my house. She had to completely twist the knife in public. I scrolled down to a long rambling post on her wall. She played the heartbroken, devoted mother flawlessly. So hard watching my boy give his all to a woman who couldn't care less about this family, she wrote. He kept the home fires burning while she was always gone, treating us like a total inconvenience. Thank God he is finally free from that toxic nightmare. The comments flooded in, cheap sympathy from her neighborhood friends. I didn't reply. I didn't type out a furious emotional defense. My pulse didn't even spike. I just held down the keys on my keyboard. Snap. Screenshot captured. I dragged the image file into a locked folder on my desktop. I did it again and again. Every lie, every location check-in, every slanderous word was neatly filed away. The sharp mechanical click of my mouse was the only sound in the room. Silence was my best weapon. I let them dig the hole as deep as they possibly could. I waited for 2 entire days. 2 days of watching them parade their stolen victory across the internet. I just kept drinking black coffee, going to work, and hitting screenshot. On Wednesday night, the silence finally broke. My cell phone vibrated violently against the cheap laminate nightstand. The screen lit up with Andrew's name. I answered on the second ring. Gordon, I said, keeping my voice low and flat. The title company caught the discrepancy, Andrew said. His tone was sharp, strictly business. The buyer's bank flagged the wire transfer when the names on the deed didn't match the county records. I leaned back against the cheap vinyl headboard. And the funds. Frozen solid, Andrew confirmed. Every single dime is locked in an escrow holding account pending a full legal review. Logan can't touch a penny of it. His temporary credit lines are going to snap back like a broken fan belt. I stared at the glowing blue screen of my laptop. A picture of Logan smiling smugly in front of his leased Tesla stared back at me. Good, I said into the receiver. Let him starve. Logan's text message came in early Thursday morning. He wanted to meet at a local diner to talk things out like adults. The panic bleeding through his grammar was obvious. With his massive payday frozen by the title company, he was completely out of options. I agreed to meet him at noon. The diner smelled like burnt coffee, cheap maple syrup, and industrial fryer grease. I walked toward the back booth. Logan wasn't alone. Maria was already sitting there, taking up half the cracked vinyl bench. A classic ambush. I didn't turn around. I slid into the opposite side of the booth. I kept my heavy winter coat on. I rested my hands obediently on my lap, hidden entirely under the sticky table. My thumb brushed against the cold plastic casing of the digital voice recorder inside my deep pocket. I pushed the tiny slide button up. A tiny red LED light blinked against the dark fabric. Maria smiled. It was a tight plastic expression that didn't reach her cold eyes. She picked up a thick stainless steel fork and dragged it across her porcelain plate, slicing into a soggy stack of pancakes. The harsh, scraping sound set my teeth on edge. Amara. Maria began, dropping her voice into an artificially soft, motherly tone. We all say things we don't mean when we're upset. But at the end of the day, you and Logan were husband and wife. That means something. You just need to sign this quitclaim deed so my son can finalize his business. She pushed a folded legal document across the table. Don't hold a grudge, sweetheart. Maria continued, taking a bite of her food. Women shouldn't be so bitter. It ages you. Just sign the paper and walk away clean. We can all be reasonable here. They were actually trying to gaslight me into handing over a house I paid for, pretending they were doing me a favor. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my pride. I just leaned forward slightly, keeping my hands hidden. I looked directly at Logan. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a cornered rat. Are you in that much debt, Logan? I asked quietly. Did you need cash that badly to sell it behind my back? The question hit exactly where it was supposed to. Logan's fragile ego shattered instantly. He slammed his fist down on the table. The silverware clattered against the cheap coffee mugs. Several customers turned their heads. You listen to me, Logan snarled, leaning over the table, spitting his words into my face. You're going to sign that paper right now. If you don't, I swear to God, I will drag you down with me. I'll pin every single credit card, every loan, every gambling debt on your name. I'll make sure you lose everything you ever worked for. You will have nothing." Maria nodded in agreement, wiping her mouth with a paper napkin. She looked incredibly proud of him. I sat back against the vinyl booth. The faint mechanical blinking in my pocket felt warm against my leg. I had exactly what I needed. An unprompted recorded threat of financial ruin and extortion. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Logan demanded, his voice cracking. "Sign the paper. I'm done talking," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned my back on them and walked toward the exit. Logan was shouting something about lawyers and ruining my life, but I tuned him out. I pushed the heavy glass doors open, stepping out into the freezing parking lot. I shoved my hand deep into my pocket and hit the stop button on the recorder. Saved? My phone vibrated in my other pocket. A text from Andrew. "The buyer wants to meet you in person. He's a retired Air Force colonel." I walked into the local coffee shop. It was a no-nonsense place with scuffed linoleum floors and the bitter, sharp smell of dark roast coffee. I spotted him immediately. David Bennett was an older man with close-cropped gray hair. He sat alone at a small corner table. His back was pressed flat against the wall. His eyes were fixed directly on the main entrance. It was a classic, deeply ingrained habit. You never sit with your back to the room. I approached his table, keeping my posture entirely neutral. When he saw me, he stood up. His spine was rigid, his shoulders squared. He extended his hand. I took it. His grip was firm, dry, and rough like worn sandpaper. It was a handshake that communicated a mutual, unspoken understanding before we even introduced ourselves. We sat down. He didn't offer a fake sympathetic smile. He just pushed a plain white mug of black coffee across the table toward me. "The title company called me this morning," David said, his voice carrying the low, steady gravel of a man used to giving directions. "They said the deed didn't match the seller's name. They froze my escrow transfer." I looked him straight in the eyes. I didn't break contact. I didn't offer a tearful story about my crumbling marriage or my treacherous mother-in-law. This man didn't need excuses. He needed facts. I had no idea the house was listed. I said, my voice completely flat and deliberate. "The property was transferred solely into my name 6 months ago." Logan forged the closing documents. A heavy silence fell over the small table. David studied my face. He looked for the micro-expressions of a liar, the twitching eyes, the nervous shifting, the over-explanation. He found nothing but cold, hard reality. My own family treated me like a naive ATM machine, gaslighting me at every turn. But this stranger, this retired man who almost lost his life savings to my husband's greed, just gave a slow, curt nod. "I believe you, Captain," David said softly. That single word hit me harder than any insult Logan had ever thrown. Captain. It was a title of respect, an acknowledgement of the unseen weight I carried. I swallowed hard, forcing the lump in my throat down. David reached into his weathered leather briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of printer paper and smoothed the crease flat against the table. The sharp rustle of the paper cut through the low hum of the coffee shop. He slid it toward me. "I'm an old-fashioned man," David explained, tapping a thick finger on the paper. "When I buy a property, I want the seller's personal assurance in writing." I asked him directly if the title was clear. I looked down at the document. It was a printed email chain. Mr. Bennett Logan had written, his digital arrogance practically bleeding off the page. "I guarantee the paperwork is completely transparent. There are absolutely no disputes or holds on the property. We are ready to close." My eyes locked onto those words. Guarantee, no disputes. It wasn't just a bad real estate deal anymore. It wasn't just a messy divorce. It was documented intentional fraud. Logan had brazenly lied to secure a massive wire transfer across state lines. I folded the paper carefully, lining up the edges with absolute precision, and slipped it into my inside jacket pocket. I looked back up at David. "He tried to use my home to steal your retirement," I said quietly. David stood up. He pulled a crisp $5 bill from his wallet and dropped it on the table next to his empty mug. "I spent 30 years serving this country, Amara." David said, his voice hardening into steel. Trust is everything. He lied to me. I stand with the people who tell the truth. He buttoned his coat. See you in court. The dominoes fell fast. Without the hundreds of thousands of dollars from the fraudulent house sale to cover his tracks, Logan's house of cards collapsed in less than 48 hours. Credit default. The bank froze his checking accounts. His platinum credit cards declined at the grocery store, the gas pump, and the local bar. Then came the repossession. A heavy-duty tow truck backed into his driveway in broad daylight. The hydraulic lift whined loudly, echoing through the quiet suburban neighborhood. Next-door neighbors peeked through their living room blinds, watching the repo guy hook chains to the front axle of Logan's jet-black Tesla Model X. The illusion of the highly successful real estate broker was dragged down the street, rubber squealing against the asphalt. My phone vibrated violently against the cheap wooden desk in my motel room. 14 missed calls. Voicemails stacked up one after another. I didn't listen to them. I knew the cycle. The first few would be furious, screaming threats about lawyers and ruining my life. Then, as the panic truly set in, they would transition into pathetic crying pleas. Amara, please, you have to answer. You're killing me here. I pressed a single button on the screen. Delete all. Across town, Maria was in full damage control mode. She frantically deleted every single smear post, every check-in, every photo of their fake high-roller lifestyle from her social media pages. The digital evidence vanished, but Andrew had already archived every screenshot. It was the morning of the civil hearing. The motel room was completely silent except for the sharp, aggressive hiss of steam shooting from the iron. I pressed the hot metal down onto the lapel of a charcoal gray suit. I ironed the fabric with extreme, obsessive precision. Not a single crease, not a single flaw. I slipped the suit jacket on, buttoning it up slowly. The dark, heavy fabric completely covered a faint, jagged scar on my left wrist. I traced the fabric over it. I never wanted a war with my own husband. I just wanted a home. But they left me no choice. They wanted to strip me to the bone. Now I was going to bury them in paperwork. I picked up the manila folder from the desk. Inside were 3 things: the private investigator's report, a transcript of the recorded extortion attempt at the diner, and the printed email from David Bennett. No tears, no anger, just cold clinical facts. I walked into the Denver County Courthouse an hour later. The air inside the building was stale and overconditioned. I spotted them immediately in the long, echoing hallway. Logan and Maria were standing outside the hearing room. Despite his car getting repossessed and his accounts frozen solid, Logan still had his chest puffed out. He wore the same cheap suit from the porch. Maria was leaning in, whispering something to his public defender, a bored-looking guy holding a thin, disorganized folder. When they saw me approaching, Logan actually smirked. He nudged his mother. They thought I was here to fold. They thought the pressure had finally broken me, and I was showing up to negotiate a settlement to save myself from his mountain of debt. I didn't break my stride. I didn't look at them. I walked straight past their little huddle and entered the hearing room. Logan followed me inside, swaggering slightly, completely oblivious to the trap he was walking into. Maria trailed right behind him, pulling her purse tight against her shoulder. They crossed the threshold. Behind them, the heavy oak door swung shut. The heavy brass latch clicked into place with a dry, hollow thud. The only exit in the room was locked. The civil hearing room was suffocating. It smelled faintly of floor wax, cheap aftershave, and nervous sweat. I sat at the plaintiff's table. My posture was locked in place. I kept my eyes fixed dead ahead on the heavy wooden bench at the front of the room. I didn't look at Logan. I didn't need to. I could hear his rapid, shallow breathing from 10 feet away. His public defender stood up. The guy looked exhausted, adjusting a cheap polyester tie. Your Honor. The lawyer began, his voice lacking any real conviction. My client maintains this is simply a messy marital misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication regarding joint assets during a stressful separation. He believed he had the legal authority to list the property. I didn't react. I gave Andrew a barely perceptible nod. Andrew stood up smoothly. He slid a crisp, heavily stamped document across the cheap veneer table toward the judge's clerk. The sharp rustle of the thick paper cut through the stuffy room. Your Honor, we submit Exhibit A. Andrew said, his tone clinical and bored. A recorded warranty deed filed and stamped 6 months prior to the fraudulent sale. The defendant signed away all rights to the property in front of a notary to dodge a looming creditor lien. He was fully aware he owned absolutely nothing. The clerk handed the paper up to the bench. The judge, an older woman with sharp features and zero patience, pulled her reading glasses down her nose. She scanned the document. Then she slowly shifted her hard gaze to Logan. Logan's face drained of color. He swallowed hard. The arrogant smirk he wore in the hallway was entirely gone, replaced by the panicked, sweaty expression of a man realizing the floor had just given out beneath him. Furthermore, Andrew continued, gesturing toward the back of the room. We call David Bennett. David walked past the wooden swinging gate. He took the stand. He didn't look at Logan either. He looked directly at the judge. Mr. Bennett, did the defendant disclose any title disputes prior to accepting your wire transfer? Andrew asked. David pulled the printed email from his jacket pocket. He did not. In fact, he explicitly lied. David read the email aloud, his deep, gravelly voice filling the room. Every word of Logan's arrogant guarantee echoed off the bare walls. When he finished reading, David folded the paper. I served this country for 30 years. David said, his voice hardening into solid iron. Trust is my lifeblood. This man intentionally defrauded me. That was it. The kill shot. Maria couldn't handle the public humiliation. The reality that her golden boy was being exposed as a cheap con artist in open court broke her toxic brain. She shot up from her seat in the gallery, pointing a shaking finger at my back. She set him up. Maria shrieked, her voice cracking with hysterical rage. She's a cold, heartless bitch who abandoned her husband. Smack. The judge brought her heavy wooden gavel down hard. The sharp, explosive crack silenced the room instantly. One more word, the judge warned, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. One more word, ma'am, and I will have the bailiff remove you for contempt of court. Sit down and shut your mouth. Maria froze. For the first time in my entire life, I watched that manipulative, poisonous woman snap her mouth completely shut and drop back into her chair. The judge turned back to Logan. He was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The real estate transaction is officially voided. The judge declared, her voice devoid of any sympathy. The escrow funds will be returned to Mr. Bennett immediately. Furthermore, I am forwarding this entire transcript to the State Real Estate Commission and the District Attorney's Fraud Division. The gavel hit the wood one last time. I stood up. I slowly buttoned the center button of my charcoal suit jacket. I picked up my bag. I turned and walked down the center aisle, stepping right past Logan as he slumped over the table, burying his head in his hands. I didn't stop. I didn't look down at him. I stood alone in the center of a cheap, unfurnished apartment. The walls were stark white, smelling heavily of fresh primer. I leaned my back against the cold drywall, watching the afternoon sun stretch across the bare laminate floor. My cell phone buzzed against my palm. The screen showed an unknown number. I already knew who it was. I swiped the green icon and held the phone up, pressing the speaker button. Amara. It was Logan. His voice was completely shattered. The arrogant sneer was gone, replaced by the wet, breathless sniffling of a man drowning in his own mess. It was a pathetic, sloppy sound that made my skin crawl. I lost everything, he choked out, gasping for air between sobs. My broker's license is gone. The state commission suspended me this morning. The bank took the rental apartment. I'm sleeping on my mother's couch, Amara. I have nothing left. I stared at a speck of dust floating in the sunlight. I didn't feel a drop of pity. The anger had burned itself out days ago, leaving behind a cold, hollow emptiness. I was listening to the frantic crying of a stranger. I didn't think your grandma would do this to me. Logan cried, his voice pitching higher in a desperate attempt to play the victim. She always liked me. Why would she hire an investigator to ruin my life? He still didn't get it. He was still trying to shift the blame onto a dead woman. She didn't do it to work against you, Logan, I said. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any warmth or anger. She did it to protect me from you. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the line, broken only by his ragged breathing. "We can fix this," Logan pleaded, his tone shifting into frantic bargaining. "You still have that $7 million, right? You can pay off the fraud charges. We can start over. Remember when we bought that house? Remember how happy we were? I'm still your husband, Amara. Please." He wasn't crying because he hurt me. He was crying because he was terrified of jail time and massive debt. He was trying to use the ghost of our marriage as a shield. "You stood on that porch," I said, my words dropping like heavy stones into a dark well. "You stood there and told me I had nowhere to go. You told me to pack my crap and figure out somewhere else to crash. I was stressed, I was out of my mind with the debt. You were right." I cut him off, my tone dropping to a dead, absolute calm. "I have nowhere left to go in your life anymore. Amara, please don't do this to me. I'm begging you. Forgive me." I pushed myself off the cold drywall. I walked toward the small kitchen counter. "I forgive you, Logan," I said quietly. "I forgive you, just to clear my own mind." He let out a loud, pathetic gasp of relief. "Thank God. But the law and your creditors won't." I pressed the red button. The call dropped instantly. A hollow, rhythmic dial tone filled the empty apartment. I opened the phone settings and permanently blocked the number. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my heavy brass keyring. I slid the old house key off the metal loop. I walked out the front door, down the concrete stairs, and out to the alley. I tossed the key directly into the rusted green dumpster. The metal hit the bottom with a sharp, heavy clank. It was over. 6 months passed. The warm spring sun slowly melted the thick layers of snow off the heavy cedar roof of Grandma Daisy's log cabin in Aspen. The thin, sharp mountain air smelled of wet bark, damp earth, and fresh pine needles. I legally sold the Denver house 3 months ago. The closing paperwork was clean. The cash hit my checking account without a single delay. That suffocating suburban trap was gone, reduced to a closed file shoved deep into a desk drawer. My life revolved entirely around this solid wooden cabin now, a home built on hard truths, not maxed out credit lines. I stood on the wide front porch holding a thick ceramic mug of black coffee. The steam curled up, warming my cold cheeks. Skye leaned against the wooden railing in her faded denim jacket, flipping thick burgers on a small charcoal grill. The rich smell of searing meat and wood smoke cut through the cold air. David Bennett sat in a sturdy rocking chair across from her, resting a dark, stout beer on his knee. We weren't celebrating a successful real estate transaction. We were celebrating a launch. I took a portion of the $7 million and funded a legal trust, the Daisy Hughes Foundation. We pay for aggressive, ruthless attorneys for women who are being financially suffocated by their own husbands. We cover trade school tuition so they can learn a hard skill, earn their own paychecks, and never have to depend on a man who uses joint accounts as a weapon. I took the worst, most humiliating betrayal of my adult life and forged it into a sledgehammer for other women to break their chains. David raised his beer bottle in my direction. He didn't offer a long, emotional toast. He just gave me a firm, silent nod. I nodded back. My chosen family didn't need a lot of words to understand loyalty. As for Logan and Maria, they simply evaporated from my world. A mutual acquaintance sent me a random text message a few weeks ago. They heard Logan was bussing tables at a cheap 24-hour diner somewhere in Nevada, working graveyard shifts for cash tips just to hide from debt collectors. I didn't smile when I read it. I didn't feel a sudden rush of petty vindication. I just felt a profound, heavy emptiness. I deleted the text and put my phone away. I didn't care if he starved, and I didn't care if he struck it rich. Complete, absolute indifference is the ultimate closure. By late afternoon, Skye and David packed up their trucks and headed down the mountain road before the black ice set in. I sat alone on the heavy wooden porch swing. The rusted metal chains creaked a slow, steady rhythm. Creak, creak. I looked out at the jagged snow-capped peaks piercing the blue sky. I rolled up the sleeve of my thick flannel shirt, exposing the faint, jagged scar on my left wrist. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. You don't erase the past. You carry your scars like heavy, ugly survival badges. They remind you of the exact price of blind trust. I took a slow sip of the bitter coffee, letting the dark heat settle deep in my chest. If you are listening to this right now, sitting in a parked car, gripping a steering wheel, and wondering if you've ever had to walk away from everything just to save you